What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Knicks Recap Podcast. We are live. I'm your host, Troy, and joining me today, a very, very special guest. You might know him, because if you type in Knicks right now, he's going to come up. SNY sports anchor, also does anchoring as well, too, for the New York Post. He's also the host of the NBA Exchange, and he covers a lot of the CBS sports stuff as well as WFan as well. You gotta know him, you gotta love him, my man, Dexter Henry. What's going on, man? Thank you so much for joining the show, Dex. I'm so happy to have you on, buddy.
What's up, Troy, man? It's good. It's good to be back. We did this about a year ago. I'm glad to be back with you. I've been watching your growth. I think it's beautiful, and I always show love to a lot of people in the Knicks content creation community, and I love what you guys do. So glad to have you on because I'm really excited because basketball is back officially next week, man. So I'm excited. Let's go.
You know, it's a funny thing that you say that basketball is back because it felt like we just saw a little bit of basketball ourselves, right, in the preseason games. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of that really is going to play into what we're going to talk about now. And for everybody looking on the screen right now, you guys see it. Loss, win, loss, loss. 4 preseason games, 3 out of the 4 was a loss. Now, some people, not me, but some people may over-exaggerate with this, right, Dex? Some people take preseason to mean a little bit more than necessary.
Take it a little seriously. Yeah.
Right. You know, and I think there's certain things that you probably shouldn't have to take as serious. I don't think certain things you should. But there is something I want to talk about, Dex. It's the defense. And, you speak to Zach Braziller a lot. He's one of my favorite guys to interview as well. And he spoke about it in terms of the three-point defense and the perimeter defense. That's something to me that just looks the same as last year. If it's not a repeat, it's very, very similar. And for me, that scares me a little bit because I don't know exactly what we're going to get from this team on that end if it repeats itself from last year. We saw these 4 preseason games. Before I get to what you liked, which may be a few things, I kind of want to get to that defensive end aspect that I was talking about. Did you feel what I felt from the defensive end with this team? Are you as concerned as I am?
You know, it's funny. I was thinking about my level of concern today before I was talking to you, and also because I'll be talking with some other people this weekend about this, right? And I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to about that. Now, I'm going to be fully transparent. I did not watch the Wizards game where they gave up was it $130, $131 to the Wizards. Jordan Poole goes off. I didn't watch it live, but I did, being the basketball junkie that I am, I did rewatch. Later the day after because I was at the Liberty game last night. And look, it did not look good, man. Troy, it did not look good at all. The effort has been good. Here's why it's hard to gauge in the preseason, right? And why you were mentioning is why you can't get too crazy. This is particularly this preseason, right? There were back-to-backs in this preseason, which myself and Stephen Bondi, we've talked about this being ridiculous. There's back-to-backs, and I think that's a problem. So you didn't really ever have the full rotation. We saw on Tuesday night in Boston, the Knicks basically didn't play anybody. They were playing the B team out there. You get it. This is what I'll say. Where it's disappointing is Tom Thibodeau talked about this. All the players talked about this. The 4th game is supposed to be the dress rehearsal before they go and play the Celtics in the opener. And what you want to see is effort. You want to see effort in the rotations. You didn't see it from the Knicks last night. You're not seeing guys fight over screens. That is concerning. If you ask me what my level of concern was on a scale of 1 to 10, Troy, I'd probably say it's about 5 or 6. I'm not overly concerned, but I don't think Knicks fans are crazy for being somewhat concerned because last year this team ranked 19th in defensive rating. That's not the staple of what you know a Tom Thibodeau team to be, right? And this is what Tom Thibodeau teams generally hang their hat on. Now, the Knicks have some players that are good defenders, but I think what hurt them last year is we know Jalen Brunson, because of his size, has some limitations on defense.
Right.
The person that's got to be better defensively for me, for the Knicks, in that main rotation is R.J. Barrett. Okay. A lot of people worried about RJ's offense, his shooting. My concern more was we saw the defense slip last year.
Yeah.
He wasn't as aggressive. He wasn't fighting. The defense definitely slipped. All the advanced numbers show this. He's got to be better. And so here's the hope that you got to hope if you're a Knicks fan before Wednesday night. Are these guys going to take what happened? I know it's a preseason game. I understand it's preseason game number 4. You can't get too crazy, but are they going to take that personally? They have time to right this ship. So, yeah, the concern is mild because I think you saw last year 19th ranked in defense, as I said.
Yeah.
Obviously, this team was ranked, was it third in offense. A lot of that was not because of shooting, because of rebounding and their ability to get to the free throw line. Right. I'll get to that later. That's actually one of the things I still see consistent with this team that I like. But defense, they've got to be better. If they are going to be a top 4 team in the East, I think they've got to get that defense above league average. They've got to, even if the defense is around 12 or 11, let's say they make that kind of jump, right? Now you're cooking, and they can keep the offensive rate somewhere in the top 10 still. Now you're cooking. That's the mark of a really good team. So yeah, I think there's some concern. Am I overly concerned? No, because I trust the coach. I trust some of the talent they have defensively. They have the talent to be a good defensive team. They just have to go out there and execute it.
That's the thing. Execution. And the execution part for me has to do with where the players are on the floor and the position that they're put in. And I think we've seen a little bit of RJ Barrett, to your point, slip on defense. Now, for me, I think the reason for that is he was moved to the 3. And I think we saw with FIBA, he's a way better player or a more comfortable player at the 2. Do you think the players on the roster are put in a position where they can succeed with Thibs, or do you think he's running out the roster based on who he believes will fit in those roles best?
That's a good question. And see, what's tough on this team is Grimes is a much better defender than him, right at the 2. Like, I think Grimes is one of the better on-ball defenders in the league. And I think he won a lot of Knicks fans over. We saw that strip he had on Jimmy Butler. I'm forgetting which game that was in the playoffs. That was game 4, I believe.
Right.
And, even after he hurt his hamstring. And so it's a good question you asked, Troy. And I'm thinking about it because Barrett, again, and it's tough to judge because the FIBA game is so different from the NBA game.
Right.
So, and you're also allowed to be a lot more physical as well, too. So, it's a little bit different. Barrett has a size where he should be playing at the 3 and should be able to defend some other threes, traditional threes, pretty well. I think players are put in good positions to succeed. I think I'm not ducking your question on this, but I think the thing when I think about the Knicks, right, is Tibbs going to be willing to expand roles a little bit more for players to succeed, particularly on offense, right? Now, I was talking to Stephen Bondi about this the other day. This was after the Boston preseason game. Grimes obviously had a great game there, and I asked him, "Hey, well, do we think Grimes is poised to have a really good season this year? Can he make a jump in this game? Because I think he's got the talent to do it, and we saw what he could do with the ball in his hands, and we saw that a couple years ago in Summer League, although that was Summer League." I think that, okay, but is Tibbs going to let him cook a little bit when he's maybe playing with some guys in the second unit and give him some opportunities to play make? I think that's the more of the question. Or is he going to be stuck into a which we Knicks fans know and saw, and media like myself watched and saw, a very ISO-heavy basketball, right? That's my thing I'm watching for the Knicks on offense. When you talk about putting players in positions to succeed, okay, how does the offense evolve? Are we going to see? I've had some critiques of Tibbs' offense. I think sometimes it looks very archaic.
Yeah.
I think that there's got to be more action, more movement that frees up players like Grimes, but also gives them the options to, handle and make plays like we've seen quickly. Just quickly get a little bit more playmaking ability. I think those are the things I want to see. I think the thing is this team, people know their roles because of the continuity that's there, but you don't want to be predictable, particularly you don't want to be predictable. And that's maybe my concern in terms of letting people succeed, Troy, is the offense still going to be predictable, or is it going to open up where you allow a Grimes, you allow quickly to flourish a little bit more, and that takes some pressure off of Brunson, off of Randall. And I think those things could be good for this Knicks team if Tibbs allows that to happen.
And, even though it is preseason, Dex, one of the things that Tom Thibodeau did, according to Jalen Brunson, was send a direct and clear message to the locker room and also the team in regards to he didn't like what he saw. And I think that has to do with the defensive effort, definitely, but effort in general. So they have about 6 days or so left in order to get themselves right before they face Boston, that home opener, I believe, on October 25th. So that's going to be a great game. Obviously, we're going to wait to see that. But a lot of questions have come up, especially from fans of the show. They've really asked, in terms of the New York Knicks, will they be active during the trade deadline? And one of the main reasons this comes up, Dex, is because you see the man over there, Evan Fournier. He really doesn't have a clear-cut role with the team. I know he's played a little bit more with preseason, which in my opinion is done to really get his value up, because I don't think he's going to get really much more time to play during the season when Thibs cuts the rotation to probably a 9-man rotation again. So I think that given the players that they have, and the IQ situation is going to be very interesting, because if they don't extend him and you have Evan Fournier there, then I might think even more so that a trade deadline move could potentially be possible. What's your thoughts and your opinion on the Knicks potentially being active during the trade deadline this year?
So I think more of it depends on what else goes on in the league than it actually does the Knicks. Like so much of this stuff depends on, because we always have to like what and who are we talking about here when we talk about trades, right? And so if we're not dancing around the issue, we know there's a big man down in Philadelphia that's playing in a place where there's a lot of drama. And is he going to be fed up with all this nonsense that's going on with James Harden, who wants out? And can they, when does James Harden get moved? I think that's the first domino that has to drop. The other thing I think people should watch, and I don't have any information on this, but I'm just saying this as a basketball fan, I think people should keep an eye on this. Keep your eye close on what's going on in Dallas. How that Luka and Kyrie thing works out. Okay. Like, I think that's something to keep your eye on too. But Embiid's probably the Philly situation's more to do. So I think what the Knicks, the position they're in a position to make a trade at the deadline. And I assume, Troy, I just want to be clear. I assume you're talking about trading for a star. That's what you're talking about, trading for a star?
Absolutely. I think because I mean, that's what the rumors at least have been in regards to Emmanuel quickly. They want to try to flip him for a star. So that would be the assumption, yeah.
Right. And so if they extend Emmanuel quickly, obviously they wouldn't be able to trade him for a year. You don't have that flexibility that you normally would have. And so I think an IQ deal is going to get done. I think the IQ deal is going to get done though. I think Fournier is I don't know if the Knicks land a star I think it's more likely the Knicks land a star next offseason than they do it this year at the trade deadline. But anything can happen. I think a lot of what the Knicks do, the point I was making before, is a lot has to do with what else goes on around the league. Somebody else is going to get disgruntled. It could be Joel Embiid. It could be Luka Doncic. It could be somebody else. You never know. The Knicks are in a very good position. I've been saying this for the last 2 seasons. They're in a good position to be patient. I think they've done everything right up to this point. They've got some decent young players. They've got picks. They're good culture around the team right now, right? With like Knicks fans and media, we're not talking about anything crazy with this team right now. We're talking about the fact we didn't like their defensive effort in the 4th preseason game. That's a good thing. Knicks fans have seen worse, right? They've had other things to talk about that they've got to worry about. So I think they're in this great position. If like I said, gun to my head, I'd say it's more likely next offseason. But who knows? Things change in the NBA so quick. And I think a lot really has to decide on what happens in Philly and if, depending on what they get in return, how they play, and how Joel Embiid feels about all this stuff. Because I'm thinking if you're him, you got to be fed up with everything that's been going on there. And listen, the Knicks have the assets to go do that. It just comes down to what they're going to give up. What I think is more likely, though, Troy, is the Knicks. I think the Knicks can play well. We'll get into what we think they can do this season. I think they can play well. Right. I think they'll be in the playoff race, come the trade deadline. And Evan Fournier is somebody who could go flip for maybe a position of need. Maybe it's that backup 4. Maybe it's some other need that the Knicks may need at that time. And I think his contract is going to be very valuable. It's expiring. He can still help a team. You can still see that Evan Fournier can play. He can't guard anybody, but he can play offensively. And he can help a team, right? So I think that can happen. And, he wants to go somewhere. Somebody's going to need some shooting and be willing to give up some defense and maybe, give up a couple second rounders or something for Evan Fournier. And the Knicks might get – I see a deal like that. I don't see a big deal, but I could be wrong. I think let's get through like the first 25 games and see what the Knicks are and see what some other teams are. And I think we'll be a little bit clearer on that.
It's a funny thing that you mentioned that, because I think that's the right course of action, to kind of really take a 15, 20 games, kind of see where you're at. I think Tom Thibodeau is always going to do that. He did that last year to an extent. I feel like he'll do that again. But since you mentioned it, I got to ask, because there was a report by FS1 earlier today by Chris Broussard, actually, who said that there's a little bit of a scuttlebutt about Joel Embiid potentially wanting to be a Knick and coming to the New York Knicks. What's your read on that? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know. I think so much has to do with like we haven't got this, and we haven't got this through the preseason. Like I will keep wondering how does Joel feel about everything going on in Philly? You know, he's the last piece left of the process, right? He's been all trusted process, he's ball in. I'm not sure the process has served him well there in Philly. I think he wants to win. I think he wants to be around other players who are dogs that want to go for it. You know, the thing with Joel Embiid is he hasn't been healthy. Does he want to come to the Knicks or not? Like, who knows? I think the Knicks should be an attractive destination for him, especially if he's paired with like a Jalen Brunson. I think it should be. I think a Brunson Embiid duo would be fantastic. I think Embiid's the kind of guy. I know the injury history is a concern for some people, but I think he's the kind of guy you go all in for. I don't think the Knicks will have the trepidation that they had with like a Donovan Mitchell, where I did think the price was a little too high. And I think we talked about this last year. I thought the Knicks did the right thing there. Here's the thing about this stuff with trades, Troy, and at this time of year and all this stuff, and we saw this with Damian Lillard and everything that goes on. Sometimes you got to believe half of what you hear, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that gets floated out and put out, and it's for feelers and to see what's happening. And maybe that's Joel Embiid letting the organization know, like, you guys better do right by me and get a good return if you trade Harden and all. So it's really tough to say. I think actions speak louder than words, and watch what teams do and watch what happens with Harden. Watch how Daryl Morey moves. Does he try to move Harden before the start of the season to the Clippers? Does he wait this thing out? Like does Harden wait this thing out and lose game checks? There's so much in the air before you even get to Joel Embiid. But I'd really like to know what Joel Embiid is feeling. Like I'd really like to know, not whether he wants to come to the Knicks, just is he tired of all this? Like that's kind of something I want to know, because I think, listen, here's what I'll say. If he's tired of all this and he wants to come to the Knicks, you'll know. We'll find out. It'll be very clear. Put it like that.
And this is actually bringing me to a great point here, because first of all, I think Joel Embiid on the Knicks, you know, with the connections, everything else like that, it all makes sense. There's a lot of reasons why it probably shouldn't happen. Them being a division rival is a huge reason.
Right, that's a hang up in that too.
Right,
yep.
And then you got to deal with Daryl Morey as well too, as we know, who really asks for the sun and the moon and the stars when he interacts with anybody in terms of trade. So you got to ask yourself, do you want to, empty out the entire war chest to get Embiid, and then who are you going to pair him up with? So I think there's a lot of questions there, which is why I think the Embiid thing is so interesting, and all the reports. I agree with you. I think half of it has to be true. Half of it where there's smoke, there's fire. So half of it has to be true, and the other half is probably whatever else you want to believe. The James Harden thing, I don't know what's going on with James Harden. He hasn't showed up to practice. I believe he's not going to show up again. And I don't know how that situation is going to roll out. As according to Ramona Shelburne from ESPN, shout out to her, she had mentioned that, Joel Embiid's basically waiting for that situation to resolve before he makes a move. So we might.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. So we might actually see a James Harden situation happen, and that might lead to Embiid maybe potentially wanting to get out of there, especially if Philadelphia does not start the season well. And I think you could make an argument that with losing somebody of a James Harden caliber, it could potentially happen. But the real question, and it comes to mind really here, is the star chase. And we mentioned Joel Embiid, and that's one name, and I get that. But there's other names. Thanks to Stephon Bondi, shout out to him, another person with the New York Post now, right? Mentioned Karl Anthony Towns. Knicks are monitoring Karl Anthony Towns, and apparently he's the most feasible in-season trade that could happen. And with the New York Knicks, the connections, obviously you saw the pregame last time. Leon Rose, Gerson Rosa, who was just promoted to Senior VP of Basketball Operations, he called over Cat before the game. And they were talking before the game. Julius Randle, Karl Anthony Towns goofing around before the game. And they're Kentucky boys. So it brings up the question, based on everybody you've spoken to, and we know how many people you speak to on a daily basis, given all the videos that you drop. What are you hearing in regards to the most realistic star? Is it Cat? Is it Donovan? Is it Joel? I mean, who's the most realistic that you're hearing at this point?
I hear that the Knicks' interest is highest on Embiid for sure. Like he's like the highest on in terms of the ranking from what things that I've heard. I think the Knicks, and the reporting there by Stephen Bondi on this is shout out to my guy Stephen. It's I think accurate. The Knicks are doing their due diligence. They're going to keep tabs on guys they've got connections with. I personally do not love Karl-Anthony Towns as a fit for the Knicks.
I agree.
I am not necessarily a fan of that move. But here's the thing. If you were to ask me of those names you just mentioned at midseason, if we're talking about a in-season trade, what's the most realistic? It would be Cap, because I think the Wolves kind of look at this year as, all right, this is Anthony Edwards' team, or we're trying to go in this direction. The Karl Towns Gobert pairing, the numbers weren't that great when they were on the court, although it was very limited because of the Karl-Anthony Towns being injured last year, and they didn't really play as many minutes together. So we'll see how that goes this year. But it hasn't looked great so far in the small sample.
Yeah.
That doesn't go well. They're going to have to trade one of those two big men. And the best return they're going to get is with Karl-Anthony Towns. So it's more likely that the Wolves are looking to trade somebody. The Knicks are looking to add somebody to pair with a Jalen Brunson. So I could see how that's the more likely scenario. I don't think it's probably more likely for all the reasons I mentioned. I don't necessarily think it's the best fit, but the Knicks are keeping their tabs, and I actually think, Donovan Mitchell is somebody else to keep an eye on still too. I still would have concerns about that as I did last year, because you're going to give yourself a very small backcourt. And I wonder if the Knicks make a move like that, do you start looking like what Portland looked a couple years ago, where it was CJ McCollum and Dame Lillard, very small backcourt, easy to target those guys in the playoffs. Don't really necessarily love that at all. Sometimes I think with trades and all these rumors and stuff, sometimes you got to look for like the trades you're not thinking about, or who's the star out there that you might not be worrying. The other guy I think people should keep their eye on, I think the Knicks are definitely keeping their eye on this too, is Zion Williamson. We got to watch what goes on down there in the Big Easy. I think keep your eye on that as well too. I would look at that if things don't go well there. He's a guy I think the Knicks can have the eye. But I think the Knicks front office, and from what I hear, they're keeping their tabs open. They're monitoring all the situations. I think they're going to be ready to pounce if the right guy becomes available. I think they're going to be ready to pounce. I think the thing is, the Knicks have to, at some point, you've acquired all these assets, you've extended some of these players, you can't keep everybody. They're going to have to make a move. I think the thing with Knicks fans is that have patience still a little bit more. They don't have to make a move this year. I don't think it's that. I think next offseason is where I feel like they're going to have to make the move, because the numbers are just going to not start adding up. You're going to have to start a lot of players tied up on extensions. Remember, next year, Quentin Grimes will be extension eligible, right? And now you're talking about extending another player, and you have a lot of guards that you have locked up. So At some point, you're going to have to make this move. I just think the Knicks, somebody, like I said, watch Dallas. Watch that situation. Somebody else might be disgruntled that we're not thinking about. SGA in Oklahoma City. What if they don't start winning the way he would have liked it, he would have thought? That's somebody you might want to look into. So it's just, I think the Knicks just are going to be patient. But yeah, they're doing their homework. Trust me. The front office has shown patience. They're doing their homework. They're going to look at Karl-Anthony Towns. They're going to keep tabs on Embiid. They're going to keep tabs on Donovan Mitchell and, all this stuff, because, we know tampering doesn't go on in the NBA. But all this stuff is done through backdoor channels, as and all stuff. But come on, these guys talk, agents talk. This all gets through many different ways. But yeah, I think the Knicks are doing their homework.
Yeah.
I see why Cat is likely, because I think the Wolves also know that it makes sense for them to trade him, for them to actually get some flexibility with all the picks they gave up for Gobert.
Yeah.
They need to try to recoup some of that back and build around Ant. So you can see why they and the Knicks would be good trade partners. But I still don't think that's a good fit for the Knicks. I don't trust Cat here in New York. I don't trust it.
I've said it 1,000 times, and I don't mind saying it to you again. Karl-Anthony Towns gets paid like a superstar, and plays like a regular player. He has Julius Randle numbers with Joel Embiid money. They don't add up. And I think if you look at the playoff numbers as well too, Cat doesn't necessarily turn it up or on in the playoffs either. He's had an injury history as well too. Missed a lot of games last year to injury. We got to see him come back in terms of a full year. The chat, by the way, is lit up, Dex. When you mentioned
shout out
Cat,
to the chat.
Shout out to the chat. Yeah, they don't like.
No,
Cat.
I was gonna look and see what people. I see what some people are saying. Yeah. Big L, I see you with the no. I'm not a fan of it because, listen, we've seen how Knicks fans have killed Julius Randle,
right,
for his struggles in the playoffs. I think the difference for me is Randle has shot the ball poorly in the playoffs, but I don't think it's lack of effort or he just completely disappeared. I've watched Cat in the playoffs, and he's foul trouble. He just completely disappears.
Yeah.
And I just don't trust it here in New York at all whatsoever. Now, Cat's more talented than Julius Randle.
Yeah.
But I actually trust him. Julius Randle, despite his playoff struggles, I kind of trust him a little bit more in the playoffs than I actually do Cat. That's saying a lot. Yeah, that's saying a lot. Yeah. I know, because he struggled.
Right.
But that's saying a lot. I just don't see him as the fit. I just don't see it, man. Like, I just don't. Some players you just like, again, I'm just in no shade to Cat. I'm like, I'm not sure he's built for New York. Some players just aren't. That's just fact. Like, some players just aren't built for a certain city or certain pressure that comes with it. We see this in all sports, and that's no shade for him. But Minneapolis is it's not New York. So, yeah,
it's never gonna be. And I think that the pressure that comes in playing in New York, I mean, we've seen people crumble, people greater than Cat crumble at the pressure. If that can happen to those type of players, I can only imagine what could happen to a player like Cat. But I don't want to stay on Cat. I know the chat doesn't want. To be honest, I think he is the most feasible. And the problem is the Fournier contract and the fact that he doesn't start the Supermax till next year, where his money right now can actually make sense in terms of a trade.
Right.
And that's what scares me. That's why it's most realistic, because everything actually, if you do the math, works out that Cat could be added without having to fully gut your team to get a player like that. You can't really say that about everybody else apart from Donovan Mitchell, who controls his future, I think. So,
right, because he's got a couple years left. And the thing is, if you add that, what I think fans have to think about is when the Knicks try to add a star, right? I think there's two things. You want to try to get the right fit, and that's always the hard thing with trades. And then you also want to leave yourself enough room so you can still have to fill out the roster. Like, what other veterans can you put around? Because you're going to give up some of these young players. Like, for all these fans out there who don't think the Knicks are giving up either Grimes or Quickly, and some people are going to ask for both, depending on what who the player they're trading for is, right? Maybe you're able to give up Barrett and one of those players. You hope if you can keep one. I think most teams are going to ask for Grimes even more because it seems like he projects to be a better two-way player.
Yeah.
But the cupboard's going to be a little bit bare. I think what the Knicks are trying to do is not repeat the mistake of what they did with Carmelo Anthony, where they left the cupboard bare and they traded everybody away and all the picks, and they had nothing when they could have just called his bluff and tried to sign him as a free agent. So yeah, it's really tough. But you're right. The money with Cat, the point you just made too, though, Troy, is like, you're right. Next year, as I said, he made a trade this year. Next year starts the first year of his Supermax deal. Now, I saw somebody in the chat talk about this. Now you're tied into all that money, right? And what if it goes south? Right now, you got somebody. That's the thing with a Supermax deal. And you get and listen, some of that you shouldn't worry as much because the cap's going to go up, so he won't take as much of a percentage of the cap. Because that's a real thing fans have to watch. Is when you look at the money, you might say, "Oh, this guy's overpaid," but look at it relative to your team and what percentage of the cap will he take up. But that's not the real problem because the cap's going to go up. The problem is you right now, if you're the Knicks, you have Jalen Brunson on a bargain. But after next year, he's definitely going to opt out of the fourth year of his deal and become a free agent. You're going to have to pay him, and he's not going to be a bargain anymore. So whoever you have next to him that you're paying, do you want those two guys, if you're taking up such a high percentage of cap, how are you going to be able to fill out the rest of your team? And it's only good value if you have the right guys paired together. I think we know Brunson is the star.
Yeah.
And listen, you trust Brunson in the playoffs. I don't trust Karl Anthony Towns in the playoffs. I've seen Brunson do it. I've seen Brunson do it as a secondary player and a primary player. I've seen Karl-Anthony Towns do what in the playoffs?
I still haven't found
seen it.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Haven't found it. And I think that's a great point. And that's why I'm out on Cat, honestly, because he's not the fit matters so much to me. I get his 3-point shooting is legendary. Probably one of the best 3-point bigs in the game. I understand that 100%. I wish that was the only part of the game, but it's not.
Right.
Especially at his height and his size. Like, the fact that he doesn't do more post play is actually criminal, given his length, size, and what should be strength. That's what the missing piece is. Julius Randle is stronger than him, and they were standing next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They look almost the same height now. So I don't even know what you would be getting if you traded for Cat. I mean, Dexter.
Here's my thing to people. I see people in the chat talking about Cat's nice. Nobody's saying Cat's not talented. Nobody's saying that, right? What the point that we're making, just because somebody's nice doesn't mean it's a fit. I think a lot of times this isn't 2K, guys. This isn't like, almost plug this person in here. He's an 88 rating and it's going, what? Like, no, man, there's chemistry, there's mindset. Can this person play in this market?
Yes.
Can they? That stuff matters. The people stuff matters in putting a team together. You think James Harden's still a good player? Like, James Harden's washed.
Right.
He's still an effective player. But the reason he's not even traded right now is like people are actually thinking about, but do I want to deal with the other stuff around him? And I think we act like the other stuff doesn't matter. Like, it matters, man. Like, can you get it done in the postseason? Are you going to show up to work, Kyrie or James Harden, right? Like, that stuff matters when you're team building. It's not just these are people. It doesn't matter what you do for work. This is the point I want to make. Whether you're an athlete, you work on whatever you do for your work. The people you work with and how that works together matters.
Yeah.
And if you have somebody who's dropping the ball or can't show up, then you're going to be like, man, I can't rely on this person to work with me. And I'm not saying that Cat can't be better, but I just haven't seen anything that trusts me that I'm like, man, definitely want Karl-Anthony Towns to play here in New York. Like, he's talented. Nobody's saying that. There's also a lot of talented people that have come to play in New York and haven't gotten it done. Karl-Anthony Towns' profiles is one of those people to me. I hope if they get him, and I hope I'd be wrong, and I hope he play. I think Knicks fans would hope he plays well in New York. But I've just seen him shrink in Minnesota in the playoffs against Memphis and some other teams, and he didn't do that much against Denver this year. So it's not that I don't think Cat's nice. I just don't trust him in the playoffs. That's it. It's simply that. I don't think he's a great fit, right? And he's also, Joel Embiid is a much better two-way player. Despite his injury history, he's a much better two-way player, better defensive player. I think he's a perfect fit with Jalen Brunson. Perfect fit. Cat, I think, we're still talking about potential. This is year 8 or 9 for Cat? We're still talking about potential? Like, come on now. Come on.
I'm not giving him, I'm not affording him any of that. For me, I'm out on Cat. I'm very, very happy that if the New York Knicks avoid him, but I think we're going to see more of what happens, because if the Wolves spiral out of control and that situation gets bad in Minnesota, I can see the New York Knicks pouncing, especially if the deal makes sense, because the next person I'm going to speak about, Leon Rose, is really that guy who's making the decisions right now. And Leon Rose and his tenure as a New York Knicks president. Now, as you know, I have the pulse of the Knicks fan base in terms of at least Twitter and some other aspects of social media. I talk to them on the general a lot, so I kind of hear both sides. And I like to think I take a good approach to understand both sides of it. And I think I can understand from one side why a lot of fans don't like Leon, because they feel like he's too patient, risk averse, and honestly, when you're brought here to attract talent coming from where you came from and you didn't do anything yet, that's one part of it. The other side of it, and Bob Myers actually pointed this out, so shout out to him, a new ESPN analyst. He basically said that, if you look at what they did, what was there before, and now what's there now, it's hard to say they haven't made an improvement. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's understandable. But some fans don't like that, because you can't, of course you can compare stuff to your past, but shouldn't you compare what's happening now with other people around the league? So there's two parts to that. What is your opinion on the Leon Rose tenure with the Knicks? How do you feel about it? And do you think he's done essentially what he was come here to do?
So my feeling is it's fine. It's incomplete.
Right.
So let's talk about this in terms of like what he's actually done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought Bob Myers made a good point about this. And Bob Myers knows a thing or two about building a team.
Right.
And obviously you got to have a little bit of luck. And he hit on some stuff with some draft picks. He got the 3 Hall of Famers, one in the second round. That helps a ton. But I think one of the misconceptions, I always talk to my friend Gerard Hector from True Hoop about this. I think one of the misconceptions with fans is fans think that a lot of teams are just like, it's one trade or one move away. Man, no team is ever one move or one trade away. Sometimes it's the trade that you don't even think about that happened. Look at the Denver Nuggets, for example. The MVP, the 2-time MVP of the league, former MVP of the league, was drafted in the second round, right? They didn't hit any. Jamal Murray is a very good point guard. One of the smart trades they made was trading for Aaron Gordon, a very under-the-radar deal a couple of years ago that nobody was like, wow, that put him over the top. And the Nuggets had some playoff failures. They were without Murray for a season, Michael Porter Jr. They got us a late lottery pick. He had some back issues, but they stuck with it. They didn't panic. They didn't blow it up and say, oh, we got to trade Porter. We got to trade Murray. We got to put another stuff. They stuck with the process of it. Sorry to bring up that word again. I think sometimes fans can be too impatient. And here's my thing. I grew up a Knicks fan. So I'm going to be very clear about this, right? So I saw some good teams in the 90s. But if you're a younger Knicks fan, and I get where you're coming from, you're like, man, I haven't seen this team win. They suck. I get it. I get your frustration, man. I get it. But that's the point. You haven't seen any kind of consistency of success. You need, and the Knicks have been talking about this all preseason, continuity and consistency. They've made the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years. The culture is different. There hasn't been any drama. The thing for me with Leon Rose is we have no idea what Leon Rose thinks because the Knicks don't talk to the media. The Leon Rose, you don't hear from him. The fans don't hear from him. So I think that's also another disconnect for the fans, right? Which I think is problematic. And I'm not saying that just because I'm a member of the media. I think that GMs and presidents should be accountable to the fans. You should hear what the plan is. You should know what the vision is. But we have no idea what the vision is because the man hasn't said anything. So I understand that disconnect from the fans. I think fans would like to know what the vision is. I think we're all speculating. I'm speculating from people I know within the organization, people I talk to that are covered a team that are even closer than me, right?
Right.
That this is what they're trying to do. I know they're definitely looking to try to add another star to get with Jalen Brunson. Like I know this, but we haven't heard them come out and say that. We don't know how they feel about the development of the young players. We have no idea because we don't hear from them. And I've seen some fans on Twitter and people say stuff and it's like, oh, that doesn't matter. They don't need to talk to the media. Okay. Well, if the team gets off to a bad start this year, let's say the team doesn't have a good season this year, then y'all going to be like, where's Leon Rose? And you're right. You should say that. I'm not mad at y'all for saying that. I'm saying you should say that. So I'm sorry if I sidetracked there.
No. Perfect. It's good.
But if you're saying this about Leon Rose and you look at what he did, and I think Bob Myers points, you look at where the team was 4 or 5 years ago and how they've turned it around. They've got assets. And I don't like you can't just hold on to assets forever. And I made that point before, right? At some point, you got to put your chips in and make a move. And I think they understand they have to do that. It's about making the right move. I think what the Knicks have done that's better than past regimes. And you have to look at each regime individually. But what's different from what they've done in the past 20, 22 years is they haven't made the move for the quick fix that isn't the right fit. And good organizations do this, guys. You don't just rush and get a player or get somebody who's overpaid. We've seen this before with the Antonio McDyces of the world. They go and get trade for Andrea Bargnani. You've seen these moves, guys. Man. And now when they're not doing it and fans are complaining, I'm like, what do you want? Also, it's not easy to trade for a star. It is not easy to acquire stars. What you can do with the things you can control is build and develop culture. And at least I think the Knicks have been on the precipice of doing that. Like I said, 2 out of the last 3 years they made the playoffs. You kind of know what this identity of this team is around Tibbs. You know how they want to play. That doesn't mean that Tibbs is the coach that's going to take them over the top. But isn't it nice for once, Knicks fans, that the team actually seems to have competency? That is a win. Competency is good. That's how you then build towards a championship level. You don't get to a championship level just overnight, but you have to have competency. There's no drama around it. I don't like that the team doesn't talk to the media. They're the only team that doesn't do this. The presidents, you don't hear from the GM or any of the front office. I don't like that. I don't really think that's good for your fans.
Right.
I think accountability is good in everything that we do in work, but I think Leon's done an okay job. You got to give him credit for Jalen Brunson? You got Jalen Brunson here. He's a star on a great value contract. Julius Randle, despite his playoff failures, has made All-NBA second team twice in 2 years, right? He's on a good. What's the bad contract on the Knicks? The Knicks don't have a bad contract on their roster.
Well,
the worst contract is Evan Fournier.
I'm gonna say that's it. That's.
But he has an expiring contract that you can trade.
Yep.
So he's an asset for you right now, right? Not a high level asset. You're not going to get back a ton, but he's a player you could trade at the deadline and maybe, like I said, add a backup for. There's no contract that you look at on the Knicks and you're like, oh man, like I don't think they'd be able to get off of this person. It's not the case. They have no players on the max contracts. Another point that should be brought up. So they have flexibility. They've got picks. That should be lauded. If you're just looking at this and say, oh, but they don't have another star for Brunson, man, it takes time. And I think the Knicks fan, maybe it's just me, I haven't watched Knicks for a while, is very impatient. And I'm like, for what? Y'all been watching non-competence for a long time. Right. So maybe enjoy some of this competence. Like it's not that bad of a situation. And I don't know how the fans feel. I'll see what some fans will say in the chat, but I think Leon should be given some of the benefit of the doubt with the moves that he's made and how he's moved. He should get credit for the fact that he hasn't jumped out the window and just said, let me grab this aging star who maybe is not a good fit for the culture. I think he deserves some of that. He deserves some of the credit of drafting Emmanuel Quickly, finding Quentin Grimes. Those are guys who were picked in late in the first round. Like, you got to give the man somewhat credit. He hasn't hit on a star other than Jalen Brunson, if you want to say, and Julius Randle's had some all-star seasons, but that's nothing to sneak. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, it's not like the Knicks are in a bad spot. I'm not saying they're a greatest spot. I do not think they're a championship contender right now, but I think they're a very good team. There's continuity, and we got to give Leon Rose some credit for that. Now, he will be judged. I'm telling you, if I had to give him a grade right now, I'd probably say B- for his job that he's done, C+ for where he's got this team to at this point. But the true test where he's going to earn his money, and I don't blame fans for this, is going to be like, all right, well, what are you going to do to get a star, a bona fide star next to Jalen Brunson?
Right.
Where's that coming? And that's, I think, going to be it's going to be a huge part of how he's judged. But that's also the job, right? Like, that's the job. But I think up to the point he's done now, I think it's been fine. Look, it's better than some of the other stuff Knicks fans have seen before. So if you want to complain about some of the regimes you've seen before, and I think rightfully so, you've been in the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years. You can't really be crying over Leon Rose. That's all I'm saying.
I think the only thing with Leon Rose, to your point, and this is the biggest issue, it's he doesn't speak. And as a fan, as so many fans want to know, you just want to know a direction. You want to know where the team is going to go. I don't care if he does media when he's supposed, all the, things that he should be doing but doesn't. That's fine. But at the very least, have a, state of the Knicks Union type of thing where you just talk to the fans for 30 minutes and you go through what you think. Instead of doing that email where it's a paragraph of your thoughts, instead of doing that, just do a video or something that at least the fans can see you, hear you, understand where you are, your passion, because we can't feel that through an email.
I get that point. I get that frustration from the fans. And that's the reason I say about speaking. It's like people say to me, well, what do you think could happen? Now, I'm kind of with you, Troy. Like, I don't think it has to be, I think it's nice when teams do this. I think your general manager or president should speak at the start of training camp, at the middle of the season, maybe around the All-Star break, and also exit interviews end of the season. I think in a perfect world, that's nice. But let's say you can't even get that. Let's say he just did once a year. He's having to speak at the end of the season. At least fans would know, like you said, what the direction is. And I think fans deserve to know that. A lot of fans put their time, energy, money. I respect that. I'm a sports fan. I understand that. I respect that for the fans. And I think fans deserve that at least somewhat illusion of transparency, right? And I think good organizations that are about their plan do this and are transparent with their fans. And I think the Knicks have done a lot of good things organizationally in the last couple of years. But I do think, it's not about me. It's not about me as a media member. Like, actually, it's more for the fans. That's who I'm actually going to bat for in this. It's not really about me. Like, it's really about the fans. I think the fans deserve to hear what Leon has to say so they can actually make some informed decisions and judgments on his work or his direction, because right now we don't really know what the plan is. We from his mouth, directly from his mouth. Like,
right.
But there's a lot of issues with that I could even go into, but yes, that's another story for another day.
And that's exactly why I mentioned it, because I speak to the fan base so often, and I hear everybody, the positive fans, the negative fans, the fans that are right in the middle. And I feel like when I talk to them, the biggest thing that they really want is just that sense of understanding where the team is going. And the only person that can really do that is the day-to-day leader, which is Leon Rose. Of course, you could have William Wesley do it. You could have Gerson Rosas do it. You could have a number of people do it, even if you didn't want to do it. So let's say you didn't actually even want to make the announcement yourself. You could put somebody else in that position to do that. And that would be fine, because at least it would be a message to hear something. But to hear nothing from somebody that you've supported, that you've followed, that you've watched, that you saw for years as a fan, and somebody's been invested in the team for so long, it is a little bit disrespectful, because you want to be able to rock with your team the right way. But how can you do that if you don't feel like you're informed with all the things that they're doing?
Yeah, and I want to be very clear on something that, like, I do not. I know this for sure, but I don't think this is this is not a Leon Rose decision that he's like, I don't want to talk to this. Like, I think fans need to understand that is not him. It comes from above, right? I don't think it's him necessarily doing that. And so I think that like I said, I agree with you. I'm all for transparency. I think I'm all for accountability in any profession, any sport. And I'm saying that for the fans. I think the fans deserve that. The fans, Leon Rose is not going to come out in a press conference and he's tampering. He's not going to come out and say that he's going to trade for this person. But what if the fans said, hey, we need to, we really think we need to upgrade our spacing. We need to be better about our spacing. We need to add a player that can help us stretch the floor, preferably a big. Fans might be like, okay, all right. You know what? I know what you're doing. I see what you're trying to do. We could piece together the other stuff and where you might try to go with that. But everything is so evasive and so quiet. And I think it's disappointing, because I actually think the front office has done some really good things that I think that's why those fans maybe don't give them the credit, because they feel so detached from them. They don't feel like they know them or what the direction is. So fans are like, oh man, I understand why they don't trust somebody that I can understand why somebody says, I don't trust somebody that I don't hear from. Like that's not crazy to me, right? Like I get that vibe. I get it, because it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. But I don't think Leon has done a bad job. I think he's done an okay job, but the job's incomplete, right? Like, he's going to be judged on the star that he pairs with Brunson and how he uses these assets going forward. That's what he will be judged on.
And that, everybody who's watching, has been one of the best interviews that I've done with Dexter. Even last year, I think this is better than last year. I love it because it's live.
Thanks, man.
And we have so many viewers watching, so many people in the chat. So before we let Dexter go, he actually stayed with us a couple extra minutes longer. So I'm gonna take a few questions.
Yeah, I'm good. I can stay with you a couple extra hours.
I appreciate you. So
I got you, bro.
If you guys want to, please go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. Dexter's here. He can answer anything for you, like we talked about before. He speaks to a lot of NBA insiders as well. So I got my questions off in terms of the stars that I wanted to know about. But what about you? If you guys have any questions, ask them in the chat. We'll definitely get to them. I'll scroll up a little bit because I saw a couple of people asking some questions before, and I think we can get to some of those. Let's see.
Shout out to the people in the chat, man.
Definitely,
a lot of people checking in. Love it.
Loving it. Yeah. Brutus, that's my guy, OG Brutus. Shout out to you, man. What's going on? Roberto says, how Josh Hart gonna play the 4? I don't want him to play the 4, Roberto. I really don't. I don't want anybody to play the 4 that's out of position. But unfortunately, what do you do with a roster that doesn't have the depth to cover it? You play players out of position to cover that. Josh Hart is the player that's, again, he did it for Team USA. So Tom Thibodeau obviously feels very comfortable with him doing that. So I think you're going to see that. Unfortunately, 6'4" Josh Hart is going to be the backup power forward. Dex, what's your thoughts on Josh Hart at the 4?
So I'm in this school. I noticed I've talked to other Knicks fans, and I see it on Twitter. Those being called X right now.
Yeah.
I've seen fans have asked me about this. Like, are you worried about the backup 4? I'm not as worried as some other people are. For 2 reasons. One, Hart's a fantastic rebounder. However, I will say I'm with Troy on this. I don't love it, right? Like, I would rather have a little bit more size. And one of my boys, Greg, who's a Knicks fan, he's more concerned about it than I am, right? And so But here's the thing, and this is why I said to him, I said, this is why I wouldn't worry as much if you're a Knicks fan. Hart's a really good rebounder, a tough defender. And I think against other bench units, because we're talking about a backup spot where he'll play the most of his minutes, I think he'll hold his own and be fine. If it is an issue, right, especially on the glass, if it is an issue, a constant issue, or becomes something that you look at and say, oh man, in a playoff series, this is something when the Knicks go to their bench, they're going to get picked on. I think this is where Evan Fournier becomes a good piece, and you could dangle that and go and try to get somebody to fill that role. I think the Knicks have the flexibility to go and address that if it becomes an issue. That's why I'm just like, let's play it out. Let's kind of see how it is. And I think if it's something they need to address, I think they will address it. I was somebody who was tripping about Obi Toppin being traded away, and I understood the whole dynamics there, and he wanted more playing time, et cetera.
Right.
And Obi wasn't a good rebounder anyway. Like, if we're being honest here, it's like what were you losing really with his size? So it's like Hart or Obi. It's like you're not losing. You kind of, no disrespect to Obi. I love what he did leaking out and everything, and finishing, and the three ball got a little bit better from the corner, but he wasn't a great rebounder. So I think that's also how the Knicks are looking at it. It's like, what are we really losing here? So my concern level for that is probably like a 3 or a 4, but I think it's something you'll see the Knicks address if they need to at the trade deadline or before.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that the Knicks have the moves and the amount of players to actually make something work if they need to. Hopefully don't have to go that route because they obviously want to save the assets for that star, but we'll see exactly what happens and what decisions that they make. Another guy over here, great subscriber actually, John Talento says, Embiid or Spider? Great question. If you're asking talent-wise, it would be Embiid for me because Embiid's just, former MVP of the league. You can't take that away from him. And he's always in the conversation. If you're talking about realistic, it would be Donovan, just because of ties to New York. He controls his future a little bit more. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Dex, what do you think in regards to the NBA?
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. Like, I think Embiid's the better fit. I think he's a better talent.
Yeah.
I think the Knicks having a big who's really good at two ways is better. I brought up my concerns earlier about having a smaller backcourt and how I'd have to, although I like Donovan. I just want to be very clear. I like Spider, but I have concerns with him and Brunson in the backcourt defensively. I don't really like that going forward. I do think he's also more logical because not in the division, controls his future a little bit more, as you just said, all that stuff. But if you had a choice, I'd take Embiid, even despite the injury concerns. I'd take Embiid.
Absolutely. It's not even a question to me. I mean, league MVP.
Yeah.
It's lights out for me. Last question we're going to do here, because I know Knick Fan TV has something going on as well, too, and I want to make sure I support everybody doing this Knicks thing, so I want to make sure we get over to their channel as well, too. So one more question for Dex. I see we got it from Big L, says, is it crazy to watch for more than just OG in Toronto? What about Siakam? Interesting.
Oh. Yo, shout out Big L to you. I actually think that's a good team to watch in terms of trades, especially because Toronto, man, like they've just been like, I don't know what their direction is.
Right.
I really like we really didn't know. We didn't like last year. Like, think about this at the trade deadline last year, right? I'm sure everybody here who was a basketball fan, you kind of were like, oh, it was rumored that Toronto was going to make a move. They were going to trade OG. They might trade Siakam. They might get off Van Vliet. Like, so obviously Van Vliet goes to Houston in free agency.
Hold up. I do think Dex, 1 second. I'm sorry. We got a super chat that actually says, Dex, you look like Stephen J. Smith in the thumbnail. Can
I tell a story real quick? Can I tell two stories real quick?
Please go ahead.
All right.
Love it.
So shout out to whoever said the super chat.
It was the New York Bully. Yeah. Thank you so much, New York Bully.
New York Bully. Shout out to you. So I'll tell a story real quick. One just happened. I was in New Orleans this past weekend, and I was leaving the hotel I was at, and I was getting on to this hotel. This woman comes up to me, and she looks at me like with a double take,
right?
And she's like, "Are you on TV?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Yeah, you like on a show?" And I said, "Well, not really. I do stuff on the digital side." And I was like, in sports. And she was like, "You the guy from ESPN?" I said, "No, that's Stephen A. Smith, not me." But she was like, "Stephen Smith? Yeah, you look like him." That's one story. I'm gonna go back. This is funny because the dude who says it, this is when my hair was a lot shorter.
Okay.
So this is almost 10 years ago. This is in 2014.
Right.
I was covering the PGA Championship in Valhalla, Kentucky, right outside of Louisville. And I was just shooting video. I wasn't even reporting anything. And I get off this media bus, and I'm walking to like the media tent that they have, and this older woman is there. She's probably like 65.
Okay.
And she sees me, and she's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're here. I can't believe you're here. She's going crazy. And I'm kind of like, who are you? Like, who's this lady? And it bugged me out. So then I go inside, I put my stuff down, I come back out. She does the same thing. She's like, can't believe, I'm so happy to have you. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm like, what? So when I was walking away, she was like, so good. She was like, have a good day, Steven. And I was like, it didn't bug me. And then I walked back and I said to her, I said, ma'am, do you think I'm Stephen A. Smith? Because I'm here to tell you that I'm not. And she was like, oh, she was so embarrassed. But she was like, I'm still happy to see you here, brother. Like, we don't have too many brothers here on the golf course, which she's right. And I was like, thank you. So not the first time somebody said that. But yeah, that was a little funny story I had where somebody thought I was Stephen A. Smith.
Oh, my God.
Shout out to Stephen A. because he's been a good person to me in my career and gave me some really good advice earlier. So shout out to Stephen A.
Shout out to him. Shout out to him.
And sorry. And Big L, we did not forget your answer. Sorry, Big L. I didn't forget about you, brother. We were talking about Toronto.
Right. In terms of the OG or Siakam thing, in terms of like, are we just gonna watch OG or would we actually go after Siakam as well? Like, is he in play as well too?
I think OG is the better fit.
Agreed.
Depending on what you're giving up. Here's the thing, and this is where I was talking about with all the stuff with Toronto, right? And we thought that they were going to make moves and trade people last year, and then they didn't, right? So it's almost like, what's the price? What's the asking price for OG? Like that's my thing to the Knicks fans. Like, as a Knicks fan, are you willing to give up like 2 firsts and I guess maybe RJ or 2 firsts in Quickly or Grimes? Like, what's the price for OJ? And also, how much better does he make your team? I like OG as a player. OG seems like the trade you make after you get that star, that he's like a third guy that could fit, that knows his role, that he seems like the trade you make after, not the trade you make right now. He's a player I actually really like because I think he fits a role, good 3-and-D player. I like him. I'm just not sure he's a trade that made right now. But to answer your question, Big L, if it was for me in terms of like how I'm building a team or trying to fit something, I'd probably lean to OG over Siakam. I like Siakam, but I think his game depends a lot on the pieces you have around him. You need more shooting around him, and the Knicks shooting right now is still kind of sus. So I'd probably go with OG because I think he actually helps more of what the Knicks need, and he actually defends well. He fits more into what the Knicks' identity is. I hope that answers the question. And
I think for the OG aspect for me is it's not going to really happen because, obviously the lawsuit between Toronto and the New York Knicks are obviously going to scrap all that.
So
that's not going to happen.
I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off, bro. I forgot about all that. Even because that's like drama. Like a trade between New York and Toronto is not happening right now. You see how Toronto's come firing back with that lawsuit. Right. Yeah, that ain't happening right now. No. Forgot about that.
But the good news is with OG, I mean, he's a player option. He's likely going to decline. He is CAA, which is something that to watch with the Knicks. So, I mean, it's possible. And he fits the position of need. We need a wing. So, I think he'd be a perfect fit, but we'll see what happens. One more question, Dex. It just comes from David, and it's about Jacob Toppin. So I actually want to ask because it's completely different from something we didn't talk about.
Jacob Toppin question.
Right. He's actually, what are the chances Jacob Toppin cracks the main roster?
Oh, the main roster. I thought he was going to say rotation for a second. I
feel like he has to at this point, right? I mean, like they released a lot. They waived a lot of players. I feel like
they waived a lot of guys.
Yeah.
I think it's likely also because of the stuff we were talking about before, right? Like Jacob Toppin profiles more as a 3 than a 4.
That's right.
So he's somebody they're going to want to keep on the active roster, but you'll see him sent down to play a lot with Westchester. I think a bunch during the season, but somebody they'll want to bring. Yeah, I think it's probably likely that he does based on some of the moves they've made already, right? Did I'm sorry, I might have missed this today. Did Isaiah Roby get waived? Did he get waived?
He got waived as well.
Roby got waived?
Him and Jalen Martin. Yeah, both of them.
Yeah, so I think it's actually likely he does it. I mean, Tibbs is a big fan of Archie Diacono.
So is Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo.
Josh Hart, yeah, that Villanova guy. What a shock. So yeah, I'm trying to think who. I think he's probably likely. Him and Arch and Ryan are probably likely to grab those final 2 spots.
I agree.
Yeah, I would say it's likely. How much he plays, I don't know. Look, no, this is no shade to Jacob Toppin, but if he's playing and we're talking about him playing in rotation, things have not gone well for the Knicks. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And if he plays 10 minutes, And his brother played 10 minutes. Jacob Toppin, I'm just saying. I don't think Jacob Toppin's playing any rotation minutes. If that's what your question was, more or less, like if he's gonna make the roster, I think so. But if he's gonna,
main roster, I think he makes.
Right, but
rotation.
I fear for Miles McBride, and I think he has even more of a role for the team than I would argue that Toppin does. I don't think that's the case. But we could talk to Dex. I could talk to Dex for hours. Dex, I could talk to you for hours, but I don't want to do that to you because I know what.
I like.
Good.
Nah, I always like talking Knicks hoops. I like connecting with the fans. I'm happy to see so many people show up for your live show, and I'm shout out to all the fans because y'all are the ones who make all this stuff possible. Whoever the Knicks content creators are, my content. Appreciate y'all watching, and it's always good to connect and talk with the fans. I like the fan questions, and I like when I see people at games, and man, it's always great. So salute to you, Troy, because I see onward and upward. I love the growth, man. I love what I'm seeing, and just keep at it. And fans keep supporting. I think I might have said this last time I was on here, but I think it's important when fans support independent media.
Yes.
There's a lot of talk about old media and new media and all this stuff, but I think that I'm somebody who comes from creating their own media, so I'm always very supportive of other people with independent media who are doing it very well, like Troy is here. And I think it's important. I love when I see people who are in the chat, they're giving super chats, they're actually giving their money to support the independent media. I think that's dope. So, for everybody supporting out there, keep supporting independent media and good content creators because we need that. The more diverse voices we have, it's better. It's good to have these discussions. It's good to have, talking about accountability trades. It's all fun, man. So media should be fun, and there shouldn't be any gatekeeping. We should be bringing more people in. I think that's always a good thing.
And I try to use this platform a lot for support, not only for the guests that I have, but also the people in the chat, the people that I shout out, and the people that help me make the show. Because I've said it before, it's more than one person. If I didn't have the fan base, the social media, all the people I talk to on a daily basis, I couldn't even do the show. So it's really thanks to you guys, thanks to you, Dex. I used a lot of your interviews as clips for my own videos on my own channel. So, I thank you so much for that and all the content that you do. I mean, you're a big inspiration to me. I told you that before, and I'll say it again. The things that you're doing and what you're in is essentially what I want to do. And the motivation that you give me each and every day to do that, honestly, thank you so much for each and every video, each and every interview, each and every second of media that you cover, because honestly, it really is an inspiration.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate that. And now it's funny, we didn't do this last season, but I got to get you to come on with me this season. We got to talk some Knicks hoops, and now I do this new basketball show, New York Got Game. Everybody can check that out.
Oh yes.
So there will, and there already has been, and there will be more Knicks content creators on that show, and basketball content creators around us. So you're gonna see a lot of people, I think, who maybe haven't been on some other platforms get their shine this coming year. So I'm really excited about that. So yeah, Troy, I got to get you. You're gonna come up to the studio. We're gonna kick it, and we're gonna do it this year. So I'm excited about that. That's gonna happen. So we'll let the fans know when that's gonna go down. It's gonna be a good one, man. It's gonna be a good one for sure.
Absolutely. And you guys, please make sure you stay tuned. If you're not following Dex, you see his ads on the screen already. I don't know what you're doing. You gotta follow him. You gotta check out his content. Just type in Knicks. He's gonna pop up. That's what happens with me. He's gonna happen with you too. Shout out to the big man Dex, doing big things, not only with SNY, New York Sports, CBS Sports, WFan. I could keep going. It's everything. He's part of everything. And he does it so well. Yeah, he's very busy.
Thank you, man.
He does it so well. Thank you so much for joining the show. We will have you back on again, so don't worry. I see you guys had some questions. We will get to them next time. I promise you guys. Thank you so much for the support. Me and Dex, we're out of here.